Most people don't pay attention to the fact that you're going to be flying in a pressurized vehicle, and you're going to be flying at 30,000, 40,000 feet above the Earth, and going at 400 to 500 miles per hour. All you want is to just have your internet and maybe something to drink.
The Interplanetary Podcast. The exploration of space for the benefit of all humankind. Your hosts here in England, Matthew Russell and Chris Carney.
Oh yeah, baby, Chang Diaz. Any relation to Cameron?
Or Jamie Franklin.
Oh, or Jamie Franklin, yeah, because that's his first name, so that would be kind of weird.
We have actually had Franklin Chang Diaz as our astronaut of the week because he has a record number of space flights with 7, but he also is designing, ion propulsion to get to Mars and stuff like that.
Oh, he would do stuff like that. He would do stuff like that because he's such a legend.
Yeah, but he's describing there how space travel should become. It should become more like, getting in an aircraft where you don't even think about the danger. You just think about whether you need your internet and whether you can still use your mobile phone, etc., etc. So, that's where we want to get to it. But as we'll discuss in the podcast, it's nowhere near that yet.
No, definitely not.
No. So I thought we'd talk about, because we haven't talked about SpaceX and Elon Musk drink for a while now, have we?
That's definitely not said drink for a while. So yeah, absolutely.
No, I know. Well, I think it's because there's so many other people talk about SpaceX and et cetera, et cetera. It seems silly for me to join the fray all the time, but I thought I'd quite like to on this one.
Yeah, let's do it.
This mission. This week we saw the whole of Inspiration4 mission play out.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on that, Chris? Initial thoughts on it?
Well, for me, I think that it's a bit strange to have just done it all kind of under the radar a little bit and then sort of gone. It feels like it's gone, so this happened. Am I right on that? It feels like, I wasn't just being ignorant. It just sort of like popped up that it occurred. Or did you have to be really looking for it to know that it was going on? It was just kind of like, to them, they wanted to just go, oh, right, yeah, we've done this. We've sent all civilians up into space and it's all gone well, I guess. It feels very different, though, from the sort of the Branson maneuver a couple of months ago. It does feel more a step towards that normality, a step towards that, going and doing this regularly. What's the word? Not regularly, normality, sort of
routine.
Routine. That was the word I was looking for. It feels like a bigger step towards that routine thing than Branson's one. Branson's one seemed a bit like showy, explosive. In retrospect, it was kind of like, yeah, that looks fun for like 2 minutes, and then you come back down again. So, yeah. Is it more sustainable? It feels like it's a more sustainable thing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I just don't know about that particular element. But I did think, like you, that it seemed to be flying under the radar somewhat.
Yeah.
It didn't seem to, considering how important a mission I think it is. Yeah. This is 4 amateurs going into space. Not just like Branson and Bezos did it with their, with Virgin Galactic and New Shepard,
Yeah.
I mean, this is the real deal. This is going into orbit. This is going into orbit for a few days.
Yeah.
So it's a bigger deal, and you can see that you can have a pretty good look at the Earth from up there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it did seem to be underplayed, and I thought maybe it's just me because obviously I read the space press and obviously I've been bombarded with it.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's sort of got, no one's sort of talked to me at work about it and sort of said, oh, do you see those Inspiration4? And I think it's down to the fact that, Netflix are, showing this documentary at the same time?
Possibly.
About it. And therefore, it wasn't as sort of well covered as it could have been because they're holding back all the footage for the actual program.
Right. That seems a bit strange, though, because they can only be good to have it all hype for the actual program.
Yeah.
I mean,
you would have thought so, wouldn't
but
you?
it's just not like SpaceX as well. It's not like them because, everyday Joe on the street knows what SpaceX are doing. That's an amazing thing, because you can't say that about a lot of the activity of the last 20 years in say, NASA or ESA. SpaceX is a household name. They've done very well at that. And it just seemed strange. It just seemed strangely underplayed, and it must be deliberate for some reason.
Because it's so underplayed, we should probably actually describe what this Inspiration4 mission actually is.
Do it, man.
So there's a businessman, Jared Isaacman, who basically invented some way of credit cards being used more efficiently, essentially.
Nice.
With this Shift 4 payment system. And he became a very, very, very rich person, a billionaire, in fact.
Ooh.
He also flies fighter jets.
Okay. Just
So
like that.
he's absolutely suitable to be, a commercial space person, a commercial astronaut.
Yeah.
Just totally the right demographic.
Yeah.
Billionaire who can fly. And so he bought this flight from SpaceX. It's apparently under $200 million, which sounds actually not too bad, actually.
Yeah, for everything combined. I mean, that's a few days in orbit as well. Wow.
But it's considerably more expensive than Branson and Bezos's little trips.
Okay.
But as Helen Sharman said, she didn't really consider people to be astronauts unless they'd gone into orbit. Although that does kind of, I don't know. It's hard, isn't it? If you've been into space, and then there's two definitions of space, the NASA one and the Kármán line, and so everyone disagrees with that. But these people definitely went into space.
Right.
As in, not only did they go into space, this is one of the sort of highest orbits anyone's ever been in.
Right.
So, they're higher than the Hubble, higher than the space station, everything. So they're going to be they're from the 588th to 591st people to fly into space.
Right. Wow.
And the 25th to 28th individuals who did it on commercially, in other words, bought their seats.
Yeah.
So, and they are Jared Isaacman, a geoscience professor called Sean Proctor, a physician's assistant, I should say, called Haley Arkano, and a data engineer called Chris Sembrowski. He seems to be the luckiest of all of them because he didn't even win the raffle that he was playing to get the seat, but his mate did and gave it to him instead.
No.
Which seems... Yeah, because he just
amazing.
didn't want to do it for personal reasons. Yeah. So, and apparently SpaceX wants to do these kind of missions, 3 or 4 times a year.
Yeah.
At least. So we should start seeing a lot more of this kind of thing. And I actually think like one of the coolest elements of this particular mission, sending a Crew Dragon up into space. But instead of having a docking hatch, because it's not going to the International Space Station, they replaced the docking hatch with SpaceX's own cupola.
Yeah.
Which is this is the window that they stick on the ISS, but it's SpaceX's own version of it.
Yeah.
And apparently, it's a really nice big bubble that you can stand in and have a look around, and that is really very cool.
That's
isn't it?
super.
Almost 3 days.
Yeah.
Going round the Earth 15 times a day.
Yeah.
And looking out the window and taking pictures and
amazing. It's
going,
it's sci-fi stuff, isn't it?
What I want to know, and I think I'm right in saying this, but I couldn't quite confirm it. I think this is the most amount of people over the last few days that have ever been in orbit at any one time.
Ooh.
So I make it 14. So I need correcting if I'm wrong, but so it's the crew of Inspiration4, called Inspiration4 because there's 4 of them. And actually the 4th flight of a Crew Dragon as well. But let's face it, it's because there's 4 of them. Inspiration4, right? There's them. There's the 3 Chinese taikonauts, who we have spoken about on the show, who are on the Heavenly Palace, the Tiangong. And there's the 7 astronauts that are on the ISS at the moment.
Right.
all in low Earth orbit, of course. Nobody going lower than that. But that I make that 14.
Yeah.
3 plus 7 plus 4, 14.
That's right.
Now, I think the most before that was 13, which was in March 1995, which were 2 Russians on and an American on a Soyuz, 3 cosmonauts above them on the Mir space station, and 7 astronauts on Space Shuttle Endeavour. So that's quite a lot.
Yeah.
That's 13.
Amazing.
That's 13. That's the previous record. And that was, again, done again a little bit later. But that's the first time. That's the most before, 13. So I think that's the most amount of people in orbit at any one time ever.
See, is there anyone knows that they can challenge this and be like, actually, there was a brief moment in 2003 when for 5 minutes there was 15 people. I hope there's someone out there who can say that. That'd be amazing.
What's really cool about this mission, of course, is it's all on second-hand equipment as well, which I guess is what makes it, reasonably cheap, under $200 million.
Yeah.
Still pretty expensive, but it's reasonably cheap. You're doing it on second-hand gear, so it's like the capsule had flown on crew mission 1. Yeah. And so that capsule has returned twice from space.
That is so cool.
Which is pretty cool.
It's super cool. I love it. It never ceases to amaze me. Like, I love it.
Yeah, and the booster, of course, was used before as well.
Yeah.
I think it was actually its 3rd flight. That's literally amazing, isn't it? Although, saying that, obviously the space shuttle did a similar sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean,
when it was used multiple times. So maybe it's not that amazing. But
the boosters weren't. That's the thing, The space shuttles were coming back, but all the boosters were getting trashed. That's the important thing.
Yeah. Although they didn't, like the solid boosters landed in the sea, and they tried to reuse
dragged them back in,
didn't they? Drag them back in on boats and shizzle. But yeah, so this is the first. This is the first flight, really, of completely non-professional crew. This is the thing that was winding Julio up, that they would be called civilians.
Right.
But, of course, lots of civilians have flown into space, and there's been complete missions with civilians on before. If you use the word civilian to mean not in the military.
Yeah.
But as I was explaining to Julio, civilian could mean not someone from the normal organisations.
Yeah.
But it's a bit colloquial, that. But anyway, so I think they've started using this non-professional crew or amateur crew.
Okay.
So it's the first private SpaceX flight. It's the first entirely non-professional crew. It's the first black female spacecraft pilot.
Cool.
Though I don't know how much piloting she actually had to do.
Yeah.
The youngest American astronaut to date.
Wow.
Which is pretty good. And the first person to fly into space with a prosthetic limb.
Whoa. Okay. That's a lot of firsts, definitely.
So that's not bad, is it?
Not bad at all. But, we are talking about the pilot. We are obviously talking mostly automation here.
I guess that's kind of one of the enabling technologies, isn't it? That you don't actually necessarily need someone to actually fly it. It's still kind of, most of it's been done by mission control. But you could say that about the space shuttle as well. They didn't really fly the space shuttle.
Sure.
So, go back to the Robert Seek interview that was about astronauts actually having to fly the shuttle. It's done on the 55th anniversary of Gemini 11, which just so happens to be the highest Earth orbit ever reached on a crewed flight. So this is the 5th highest Earth orbital human flight after a couple of Gemini flights.
And that is amazing. That is, that's happened when it's being crewed by non-professionals.
Now we should mention obviously that the whole idea of the flight is to try and raise $200 million for St. Jude's childhood cancer research, and some of the crew have actually been essentially treated and cured at St. Jude's Childhood Cancer Hospital.
Wow.
Haley Arcano is, a recipient of that particular hospital and works for the hospital now as well. I guess it's a good cause. So I guess one of the reasons why it's not been as let's say, famous as those other two flights, or at least in my perception and your perception. I don't know about everywhere else, but maybe it's because it doesn't seem as controversial somehow. It doesn't seem like it's billionaires paying for space flights.
Maybe the story's too boring for them.
What's amazing is I don't think the general public really know the difference between suborbital and orbital flight. No. So it's just like going, it's sold on the press by, these are people going into space.
Yeah.
And that's it, really. So it's like, oh, yeah, they went into space. That's it. And then their interest is lost at that point. So, the difference between this Inspiration4 flight is quite remarkable, isn't it? It's very different.
Do you think it could be, do you think we might have got, like, sort of exposed more if it was, say, for... What are the London? Let's say it was Alder Hey. You know what I mean? It's like, do you think that our press would have cared more if it was a local cause?
Yeah. I mean, I suppose our press gave a little bit more because it was Richard Branson.
Yeah.
Sir Dicky Pickles. I guess that there was an element in there because of that. Yeah. And I guess the pilot was Scottish as well. So, there's some local interest. But I don't think it's that. I mean, I think the press that I read is fairly international anyway.
Yeah, sure.
It just hasn't sort of seeped. It just doesn't seem to have landed as much as I would have thought it would have done.
Yeah, and it's funny this is the one that's probably for like the best cause ever. It probably could have done with a bit more. But I have no doubt they've raised the money. Now,
normally when you go into space, Chris, you're normally, for the first time, with someone that's been into space before.
Yeah, like if you're doing a parachute jump, you do a tandem, don't you? You got someone behind you who's done it before.
But no one on this spacecraft had done it before. And that's the first time that's happened since the Chinese started going into space on the Shenzhou 7 in 2008. So that's another first. So must be quite weird, mustn't it, going into space in a capsule and nobody else has done it before.
No, it's very strange to think about it like that, actually. Yeah, just looking to the person to the left for a bit of reassurance, and they're looking at you, terrified.
Does anyone know what they're doing?
Yeah.
No, not really. I mean, we've been in loads of training. I mean, we got to point out that these people did a lot of training at SpaceX's facility, and I would imagine that's quite a lot of the cost must be around that.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
It must be expensive to train people up.
Hugely expensive, the training systems and everything. Yeah. So even if you're driving down the cost of the mission itself, like you've got about all the sort of administration around it is enormous.
But how much is SpaceX kicking ass? Because there was also 2 Crew Dragons in orbit. This is an entirely new vehicle, and suddenly there's 2 of them on orbit at one point. How cool is that?
It's absolutely cool.
But I do like the whole idea of that they really... I think that's a really neat solution, that cupola that goes inside that nose cone. Because the nose cone sort of pops up to reveal that docking mechanism, but now it pops up to reveal this beautiful glass dome that they can look at.
Yeah.
Gets fitted in and gets fitted out. Like I said, this is the second time they've used the capsule resilience, but they can sort of just say, well, let's take out the docking mechanism and stick this glass dome in. Jobs are good.
Yeah.
Now, of course, this is the first flight that they've flown with a glass dome, which I think's a bit weird. I would have thought that they'd done a test flight with it first.
Yeah.
Because you've got things like the thrusters that sort of blast, the manoeuvring thrusters actually... They had to sort of put protective heat panels on the glass to stop them, when the thrusters are being used. It's a little bit scary.
It's quite cocky, I have to say. But for that view, brilliant.
Yes. So they actually wanted to go 357 miles high. Now the altitude was actually chosen by Jared. So his ticket actually allowed him to sort of choose his flight profile. So they ended up going 364 miles above the surface.
Yes.
That's higher than the Hubble Space Telescope. Gemini 10 and Gemini 11 went 470 miles high.
Yeah, 547 kilometres, Hubble. 340 miles.
But I think STS-31 flew 382 miles, so that's the third highest, and that was to launch the Hubble Space Telescope. So it's obviously been dropped down in orbit. So that actually means, of course, because they're so high up, much higher up than the International Space Station, that they're actually being exposed to a different doses of radiation.
I was going to ask about this. I was going to ask about how if the effects of gravity are any different from if you're 100 miles more up or so. Probably not,
because that very minimal.
Yeah,
because
that's all about free fall.
That whole idea of being it's not about how high you are. That microgravity.
Yeah.
It's just the fact that you're falling.
Yeah.
So the gravity is minimal. So the difference in gravity is highly minimal. But the radiation, I think, will be something that they're looking at. So that's one of the things that they're supposed to be doing, is doing science experiments with their bodily fluids, et cetera, and seeing how their, the bacteria in their gut and stuff like that changes on a space flight. So they are doing a little bit of research, I suppose, as much research as for untrained scientists could do, which is good, I suppose. So they're doing something. But there's a few things that they did while they were up there. Did you know that they rang the stock market's closing bell while they were in orbit?
Okay.
They had a phone call with which famous actor? Do you think?
Shia LaBeouf.
No, it's Tom Cruise, because Tom Cruise is going to do a similar sort of thing, but he's going to go up in a Crew Dragon, but visit the ISS to shoot a film.
Of course he is. Of course Tom Cruise is going to do that. Amazing.
So Tom Cruise is in, is in with SpaceX. So he had a little chat with them, as did some kids from the St. Jude's Children's Hospital, which I think is pretty cool. That's
really cool.
So, yes, they splashed down in the Atlantic Ocean.
Yep. Because
normally SpaceX astronauts splash down in the Gulf of Mexico.
Right.
It's the first time that a Dragon capsule has returned to the Atlantic Ocean. And I should imagine that actually has some logistical problems, like you need the all the craft and everything to go out and fetch the thing.
But the Gulf of Mexico it's just roughly connected to the Atlantic, is it not? It's But they would have had to consider we've not done this before. We had to work out how we do it in this part of the ocean, and maybe it's a bit more of a weather systems are going to be a bit different. How far up was it? Is it like, are we talking just off the coast of Florida or whatever, or higher up?
Do you know what? I don't know the exact position where they splashed down. And I should imagine I should imagine it's pretty accurate where they splash down these days. Yeah. But I guess that's a pretty dangerous aspect to the flight. Now, I wanted to quickly talk about danger.
Yeah, okay.
Because these flights still are really dangerous. As in, I think, what would you compare it to? Like climbing Mount Everest is dangerous, but tourists do it, right?
Yeah, that's a nice comparison, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's probably similar to that. So, at the moment it all looks fun and games, but inevitably at some point, particularly if we start having lots and lots of these flights, a little bit of complacency will creep in. And I wonder when, I know this is really morbid, but I wonder when we'll have our kind of Challenger version of commercial spaceflight.
Yeah, because it's going to, plane crashes are not as common, but they still very much happen every year.
Well, yeah, and when they happen, they're normally sort of pretty high in the news. Yeah. Something like this would definitely be high in the news. I mean, I guess it's a little bit like fairground rides as well. Fairground rides go wrong, don't they? And people die. Yeah. But obviously, many more people go on fairground rides. They're incredibly safe.
I don't. I mean, much love to those people who were injured at Alton Towers a few years ago. But I was a little bit smug about all that. I was just like, I told you. I hate roller coasters.
I can't tell you how much I love roller coasters, and if they feel dangerous, I love them even more. I actually don't know what's wrong with me, but I absolutely love the ones that are run by people that look slightly dodgy. And you think, God, how are these people in charge of something that can clearly kill about 30 people if they haven't looked after it properly?
That's what I'm talking about. You know. Honestly, so that's my...
But
I'm the complete opposite for the same reasons.
Man, there's something quite cool about it. I like it.
Get me on the teacups. Honestly, put me on the teacups. I'll be happy. Maybe a log flume if I'm feeling a bit dangerous. But yeah, sorry. Back to Danger. My middle name's Danger. But let's go
back to Danger. Back to Danger. I think. You know, it's dangerous. Spaceflight's really dangerous when you think about the power of a rocket, and it's just like it is a massive bomb that's barely being controlled and literally lifting you into space. Yeah. And then you've got to come back from space going 17,500 miles an hour and hope that you don't burn up in the atmosphere or skip off the atmosphere, never to be seen again. You know, so it is dangerous.
Yeah. And also with this one, you haven't got a cocky guy who's been there up 4 times going, don't worry, we got this. The 4 of you are going,
this, yeah.
We haven't got this.
Yeah. You haven't got a Neil Armstrong or a John Young sort of going, okay, let's stay calm here. I'll make sure that I bring us all down.
Yeah.
You know? It's like, you don't have that. You've got, well, actually, I mean, this Jared geezer flies extreme fighter jets for
what a guy.
You know, for a daft laugh and
yeah,
that.
for a laugh.
So he's probably all right. Anyway, so I mean, I thought it's a very interesting mission, but I actually found the coverage of it weird.
Yeah, it felt like an open goal, and it's just it's quite strange.
Yeah, it is quite strange.
But I'm looking forward to if it comes out on Netflix, though. That sounds like that's going to be a great thing to watch.
I know it is on Netflix. I've actually started watching it. I actually started watching it this week. Yeah, I mean, they're showing all the training and stuff. It's like all those documentaries. They have like talking heads that kind of oversell it, so it feels a little bit irritating.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so they tell you what they have to do, and then you see what they have to do.
And
then
it looks a bit like an advert.
Yeah.
You know, an advermentary.
Yeah.
It's still good. It's still very interesting.
Sure.
It would be good if it was being done by, you know, Louis Theroux or something. That would be fun.
That'd be great. Yeah, Adam
Curtis.
Would actually be great. Adam Curtis would be good.
Yeah, Adam Curtis, yeah. No, I think that would be a little bit weird, Adam Curtis doing it. But before we go, it's a very quick episode because I'm still in getting hammered by work mode.
Yeah, sure.
There was a couple of very interesting papers that came out recently about a new type of dark energy.
This is what I love about this podcast. You say, before you go, we've just got some news that we might be able to solve the universe's expansion mystery.
So we have talked about this several times on the podcast, that there's this weird, very big problem in cosmology at the moment, which is we know that the universe is expanding and the expansion is getting faster, but what is a strange one is that you can measure it in 2 different ways. You can measure it using supernovas or standard candles, and there's actually different standard candles coming online. You know, maybe even gravitational wave events and things like that maybe can be used as standard candles. In other words, you know how bright something is, so you know how far away it is, and how fast, therefore, the universe is expanding away from that point. And so you can measure the expansion of the universe, and you get this what's known as Hubble's constant, which is the expansion of the universe the rate that it's expanding. Now, there's another way of measuring it, and that's using these acoustic bubbles that formed in the early universe in the cosmic microwave background. In other words, this kind of radiation glow that's left from the formation of the universe, a very, very early universe. And as the universe got to a certain point, these acoustic sounds got trapped, almost like an image of them, of where they are at that point where the universe changed. It because the way, the temperature got to a certain point where the universe changed and these acoustic vibrations no longer could propagate. And you can see that pattern in the cosmic microwave background and actually in the way that galaxies are formed around each other as well. You kind of got these various densities where you expect to see these acoustic bubbles.
Yeah.
Now, using those acoustic bubbles, you can kind of work out what the expansion rate was at the beginning of the universe as well.
Okay.
But the big problem is these two expansion rates are different.
Of course they are.
Which is pretty annoying, right? Of course they're different. And really the race is to try and find out why that is, right?
Right, okay.
There was a guy called Mark Kameonkowski. He was called that, and I'm sure he still is called that. So a couple of years ago, Mark Kameonkowski was at the Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore in Maryland. And Maryland. Is it Maryland?
I call it Maryland.
Maryland. Suggested that there was an extra ingredient, that there was this thing called early dark energy.
Right.
In other words, a dark energy that existed at the beginning of the universe, which was a sort of fluid that's in the universe that would have just withered away after the first few thousand years. It just disappears.
Right.
But what it doesn't actually add to the acceleration, this weird energy stuff, this fluid, but it would have caused the plasma to cool down faster, and therefore the bubbles that are trying, that are sort of growing big, these acoustic sounds would have been frozen a little bit quicker than the measurement that they're using at the moment. In other words, the universe would have been cooling down slightly quicker, and therefore that would skew the expansion rate now.
Ooh.
And so you'd have a more accurate expansion rate. And basically, this is just, this is one of those things where you concoct a theory not because you think it's kind of going the wrong way round. You're just trying to think of ways of making the data fit rather than working from first principles. So this is something that basically makes the data fit. Now, these two papers that have just come out are using the Atacama Cosmology Telescope in Chile, and it's the data that's been collected between 2013 and 2016. So it's like a big dive into that data by two different teams, and they've come to the same conclusion that the data has a sort of hint that maybe this early dark energy actually does exist.
Right.
And that would actually help with this measurement problem, basically. But the difference between the two measurements of the expansion of the universe.
Okay. Because that doesn't exist in the other measurement. It exists in the cosmic background measurement.
Yeah.
I'm there. I'm following this. This is great. But what's the implications of it?
Well, the implication is that they might have actually found an explanation about why these expansion rates are different.
Right. Okay.
And obviously, not much more than that, to be honest, because obviously then they have to start working out what these things are. I mean, the fact that they've got the word dark in them means that no one actually knows what the hell they are. The cosmological standard model includes dark energy and dark matter and matter. So 2/3 of the things that are in this model are dark, i.e. we don't even know what they are.
Right.
So that's not very good, is it? It's all. I would say it's almost embarrassing.
Well, I've said it before.
It's like saying, I know the recipe for this cake, but 2/3 of the ingredients, I have no idea what they are.
I've said it before, though, Matthew, and I'll say it again. It's God.
Perhaps it's God.
Perhaps?
I don't think it is.
It's not likely to be God.
I'm not ruling it out, but I just don't see where your evidence comes from, where your hypothesis.
I don't need evidence, Matthew.
Just faith.
Sorry.
So yes, but as people have pointed out, though, there are quite a few inconsistencies within this study, and nowhere near enough data to sort of say this is a slam dunk.
Okay.
But the teams, the teams are fully aware of this. These are sort of skeptical teams of hard-nosed conservative people. That's how they've been described, and so they're not. They've been very, very careful with the data and looking through it. So they're not sort of saying yes, we found it, but I think they were both teams were surprised that they got this result. that sort of hints at this early dark energy stuff. And because they both got it in different ways, it's a preliminary result that looks reasonably exciting.
Definitely.
But let's not all get our hopes up just yet.
No slam dunks just yet.
Anyway,
no slam dunks yet. But
definitely no slam dunks. Way more work needs to be done. But it's an interesting result, nevertheless. It's things like this are human beings homing in on what the heck is going on in the universe.
Yeah.
And that has to be celebrated,
definitely,
right?
because every time you do that sort of thing where you wake up in the middle of the night and you go, oh my God, I'm on a rock in the middle of vast amounts of space, surrounded by other rocks. And then, these are the guys who are trying to help you understand that, and much respect to them, and much power to them.
Yeah, so both these papers are on the archive as of this month.
Cool.
J.C. Hill et al. And V. Poulin et al. So... I'll put links to those papers if anyone wants to do a deep dive into something that's incredibly complicated and hard to read. So, I didn't. I must admit, I started reading those papers, and they're heavy going because it's you're talking about polarization of light and all these kind of things, and it gets pretty wacky pretty quickly.
Bit of bedtime reading for me there,
but it's yeah, but if you're a cosmologist, this is your bread and butter. Yeah. What are you up to, Chris, this week?
Ooh, back to work. But I'm enjoying it. So yeah, and I've got my wonderful wife coming back home from Norway next week, so I'm looking forward to that as well. How about you?
I shall be spending a lot of it driving up and down the A303 past Stonehenge, from Devon to Guildford, so and working with young musicians and technicians, putting on shows.
Fantastic.
So I mean, it's been I have to say, it has been really fun getting back in the lecture theatre and actually talking to students. It's actually been really
good stuff, man. That's great to hear. Really cool.
I guess that's it.
Yeah.
Chris,
do you want to know where you can, where people can find out things? Maybe.
Oh, yeah. Where can they?
I love saying this because it's interplanetary.org.uk.
That's absolutely excellent. And a massive shout out to my Patreons.
Wonderful. Over
on patreon.com/interplanetary. I shall read out the names next week because it's that time of the week, a time of the month. You can join them and be part of this absolutely awesome family. It's been popping off in the Discord, but I've been very busy and unable to really communicate very well. I was pulled up on a little point that I got wrong, by the way.
What was that?
A couple of weeks ago, I said that Jupiter was something like 98% of the mass of the solar system once you'd removed the sun. It's not, of course. It's only 70.
Oh, but still a lot, Matt. Come on.
Still, it's still pretty big. And I think if you combine Jupiter and Saturn, you're up in the 90s at that point. So it's a lot. But I was wrong, of course. The sun is 99.999% or whatever it is percentages. And so I apologise for that. I was misremembering.
That's okay, but that's why we have misremembered. Doesn't that
teach me not to write notes
say that?
Yeah, luckily my job's not on the line as a result. Or if you want to vote me off the Interplanetary podcast and just have Lynn and Chris, that's fine. Or bring back Jamie.
No, you are our leader. Like there's 4 people on the space flight. You're the guy who we look to, and he goes, I got this. Yeah. So we do need you.
Don't worry, guys, I've got this. I'm going to land this podcast to its ending. You can hear the theme music as it's winding up. This is us skipping off the atmosphere into space. Bye, bye,
Spice Podcasts.
We're going to die.